Welcome to your recap for Unit 5. In Unit 5, we handle several topics. We start out by looking at some presidency scholars, James David Barber, Stephen Skowronek, and Fred Greenstein. And then from there, we move on to looking at Bill Clinton from a number of perspectives. There's the Milkus and Nelson chapter on Clinton. There's the War Room campaign documentary. And then there's the usual clip from the presidents. And then from Bill Clinton, we move on to a subject that related to Bill Clinton and other two-term presidents, and that is the 22nd Amendment that imposes presidential term limits. So let's begin by looking at the three presidency scholars. If you look at Chapter 6 of Ellison Nelson, you'll see there's a debate between Stephen Skowronek and Fred Greenstein. Stephen Skowronek, who makes his argument in Choices Chapter 5 as well, basically says that an individual president doesn't have a whole lot to do with his own success or failure. A lot of it has to do with luck. When is he serving? At what point in a political regime is that president serving? And is he affiliated with or opposed to that dominant regime? That's very different from what Fred Greenstein argues. And Greenstein looks at the individual characteristics of the president and looks at the different facets of their leadership style. So some very different points of view there. And James David Barber's view is to look at the president's character. And he comes up with this typology where he looks at, is the president active or passive? Does he do a lot in office? Does he not do a lot in office? And then is he positive or negative? Does he enjoy being president or does he dislike being president? And then he kind of fits different presidents into those particular boxes. So those are the three presidency scholars that we wanted to look at this time around. They're pretty important in the field of the presidency, so if you haven't committed all three of their models to mind, you should do so. You'll probably see at least a couple of them again. So from there we move on to Bill Clinton. As you know, Bill Clinton was president basically throughout the 1990s, and as I mentioned in an earlier recap about Ronald Reagan, Clinton was a great orator. And if you haven't seen Bill Clinton give a speech, you should. Go to YouTube. He has speeches there. There's one of my favorite stories about Bill Clinton was when he was giving his defense of healthcare reform in 1993, in September of that year, and his aides loaded the wrong speech into the teleprompter. And so for 9 minutes, he ad-libbed. And you can find the clip out there. It's amazing to think, you would never know. He just totally winged it and did an amazing job, and people didn't know. So check that out. Milkus and Nelson look more closely at Clinton in Chapter 13, and you'll also be able to watch those video clips. And then lastly, we talk about the 22nd Amendment, and that appears in Ellison Nelson Chapter 5. And as you know, there was a two-term tradition for the presidency. Presidents would serve at most 2 terms and then step down. And that tradition was broken by Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was elected 4 different times to the presidency, although he passed away shortly after he was elected for a 4th time. And a consequence of his presidencies was the fact that Congress decided to amend the Constitution and prevent that type of thing from ever happening again. And so the 22nd Amendment came about, and in Ellison Nelson, there's scholars that take either side of this debate. On one hand, David Carroll argues that the 22nd Amendment is undemocratic. It prevents a candidate that the people might want to return to office from being eligible to serve. And on the other hand, Thomas Cronin argues that it's a perfectly fine change to the Constitution. It was popularly supported, and it serves its own good goals. It keeps somebody from abusing power because they're not there long enough. At least that's the idea. And it continues the rotation in office. You have fresh ideas and new people serving. So those are the 3 big topics for Unit 5, and that's your recap for Unit 5. I will see you back here next time.